Welcome to Life Confessions TV. Try to relax and feel the story.
8 years. That's how long my marriage lasted. For 8 years, I believed I knew the man I lived with, his habits, his fears, his past. I knew he drank his coffee black, that he always woke up before me, that on Sunday mornings he liked to cook breakfast while old Jazz played quietly in the kitchen. I thought I knew almost everything about him, or at least that's what I believed. My name is Megan Whitmore, and until last fall, I thought my marriage was completely normal. I met my husband in Chicago when I was 27. I worked at a small architecture firm downtown, and he worked in logistics for a transportation company. He seemed calm, reliable, not the most talkative person in the room, but thoughtful and steady. 2 years later, we got married. Nothing extravagant. A small wedding, close friends, family, and a promise that we would build our future together. For the first few years, that promise seemed real. We bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. We adopted a golden retriever named Maple. We talked about starting a family someday. Of course, we had disagreements sometimes. Everyone does. But nothing serious. Nothing that made me question our marriage. At least, not until the night everything changed. It was a Thursday evening in October. I had gotten home earlier than usual because a client meeting had been canceled. The house was quiet. My husband had texted me that he'd be working late, so I ordered takeout, fed Maple, and spent the evening catching up on a design project at the dining room table. Around 10 o'clock, I finally shut my laptop. I remember stretching and thinking about going upstairs to bed when Maple suddenly ran toward the hallway closet. She started scratching at the door. Normally, she ignored that closet completely. It was where we kept old boxes, winter coats, and random storage stuff. But that night, she kept pawing at it like there was something inside. Okay, I muttered, walking over. I opened the door. Nothing unusual. Just the same old boxes stacked along the wall. But Maple kept sniffing one particular box on the top shelf. A dark gray storage box I didn't recognize. I pulled it down. At first, I assumed it was something my husband had packed away years ago. But when I lifted the lid, I realized something strange. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, old photographs, and none of them had anything to do with our life. They weren't from our wedding. They weren't from our vacations. They weren't even from Chicago. These photos showed a completely different place. A small coastal town, bright blue water, a white wooden house near the beach. And in almost every picture, my husband was standing next to the same woman, a woman I had never seen before. She had dark hair and a wide smile, and in several pictures they were holding hands. In one photo, they were standing in front of the White House. He had his arm around her waist. They looked happy, not like friends, like a couple. My stomach tightened. At first, I tried to convince myself there was a simple explanation. Maybe she was an old girlfriend. Maybe it was from college. Everyone has a past. But then I noticed something else in the box. A stack of letters, tied together with a thin piece of blue ribbon. The handwriting on the envelopes was neat and careful, and every single letter was addressed to my husband. My heart started beating faster. I untied the ribbon and opened the first letter. The paper was slightly yellowed, like it had been written years ago. At the top was a date, March 14th. 8 years ago. My breath caught. 8 years ago. That was the same year we got married. I kept reading. The letter began with 3 simple words. I miss you. My hands suddenly felt cold. The woman wrote about how quiet the house felt without him, how their son kept asking when his dad would come home, and how she hoped he would visit soon because the boy had a school play coming up. I stopped reading. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood something. Their son? My husband didn't have a son. At least, that's what he had always told me. We had talked about kids many times. He had said he had never been married before, never had children. But the letter in my hand said something completely different. I flipped through the photographs again, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the background of one photo, there was a little boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old. He was running across the sand with a small red bucket, And my husband was kneeling down beside him, smiling. The same smile I saw every morning across our kitchen table. But the child wasn't ours. And suddenly one terrifying thought crossed my mind. If this letter was from 8 years ago, that meant one thing. My husband hadn't hidden a relationship from before we met. He had hidden an entire life. I sat on the floor of the hallway closet for a long time, just staring at the photographs, trying to convince myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe the letter was fake. Maybe the boy wasn't really his. Maybe the photos were old. But the dates on the letters kept repeating the same thing. 8 years ago. 7 years ago. 6. 5. They stretched across nearly our entire marriage. My hands were shaking when I opened another letter. This one was shorter. The handwriting looked rushed. "I know you said things are complicated now," the woman wrote. "But he keeps asking why you don't visit anymore. I don't know what to tell him." My chest felt tight. The next line made it worse. "He still sleeps with the toy boat you gave him." I looked back at the photograph of the little boy. The red bucket. The beach. The White House. My husband had never mentioned a coastal town. Never mentioned a child. Nothing. I kept digging through the box. Under the letters was one more thing. A document. Folded carefully. Official looking. My heart started pounding again as I opened it. At the top of the page were the words, "Birth certificate." My eyes dropped to the name. The boy's name. And below it, the name of the father. My husband. There it was. Clear as day. No doubt. No misunderstanding. He had a son. And he had kept that secret from me for 8 years. I heard the front door open downstairs. My heart jumped. He was home. I quickly closed the box and stood up. For a moment I considered putting everything back and pretending I had never seen it. But something inside me had already changed. The truth was sitting in that box. And there was no way I could ignore it now. I carried the box downstairs. He walked into the kitchen just as I set it on the table. He looked tired, loosened tie, briefcase in one hand. But when he saw the box, he froze. Completely. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly set his briefcase down. "Where did you find that?" he asked. His voice sounded tight. I crossed my arms. In the closet. Silence filled the kitchen. Maple lay on the floor between us, completely unaware that our lives were about to explode. I opened the lid of the box, slowly, and turned the birth certificate toward him. "You want to explain this?" He didn't look surprised. That was the part that hurt the most. He just stared at the paper. Then he rubbed his face with both hands. I waited. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "I was going to tell you someday." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Someday?" I pointed at the letters. "These go back 8 years." He didn't answer. Instead, he sat down at the kitchen table, like someone who had just accepted that there was no escape. "He's 9 now," he said quietly. The words hit me like a brick. 9. Which meant the boy had been born before our wedding. Before our engagement. Before everything. "You have a son," I said slowly. "Yes." "And you never thought to mention that?" He stared at the table. "It's complicated." I shook my head. "No, it's not." My voice was starting to rise. "You lied to me for 8 years." He looked up finally. "I didn't lie." I stared at him. "You told me you didn't have kids." "That's because I'm not in his life anymore." For a second, I couldn't even process what he had just said. "You walked away from your child?" His jaw tightened. "That's not what happened." "Then explain it." He hesitated. And in that hesitation, I realized something. He wasn't afraid of telling the truth. He was afraid of something else. Something much bigger. And a strange feeling crept into my chest. A feeling that this secret was only the beginning. He leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he said something I never expected. "You weren't supposed to find that box." I crossed my arms tighter. "That's the part you're worried about?" "No," he said quietly. I'm worried about what happens next. The way he said it sent a cold chill down my spine. What does that mean? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the box and picked up one of the photographs. The one of the little boy running across the sand. That town you saw in the photos, he said slowly. It's in Maine. I stayed silent. He continued. I used to live there before I moved to Chicago. With your girlfriend and your son? Yes. My chest tightened again. So, what happened? He stared at the photo for a long time, then finally said it. I left. The word hung in the air. You just left them? I asked. It wasn't that simple. Then make it simple. His voice dropped lower. There was an accident. I blinked. What kind of accident? He hesitated again. Then he said something that made my entire body go still. The night before I moved to Chicago, the police came to the house. My heart began to pound. Why? He slowly turned the photograph over in his hands. Because someone had filed a report against me. For what? He looked up, and for the first time that night, I saw real fear in his eyes. Assault. The room suddenly felt smaller. What? He swallowed. The woman in the photos, her brother, and I got into a fight. I waited, and he ended up in the hospital. My stomach dropped. How bad? He didn't answer, but the silence told me everything. You could have gone to prison, I whispered. Yes. The word landed like a stone, but I didn't. Why not? He rubbed the back of his neck. Because her family didn't want the scandal. They pushed for a settlement instead. I stared at him. So you just left town? Yes. And left your son behind? Yes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You abandoned your child to save yourself. His eyes hardened slightly. I thought it was better for everyone. Better for you. Silence fell between us again. Then I asked the question that had been building in my chest since the beginning. Does he know about me? My husband shook his head slowly. No. The answer hit harder than anything else. 8 years. 8 years of lies. 8 years of pretending his past didn't exist. Then another thought suddenly struck me. I pointed to the stack of letters. She's still writing to you. Yes. Have you answered? No. I laughed again. A bitter sound. So, she keeps hoping you'll come back. Yes. And you just ignore her? He didn't respond. The truth was obvious. He had erased them from his life. Just like that. But then I noticed something strange. One envelope in the box was newer than the others. The paper looked fresh. The date at the top said, 2 weeks ago. I slowly picked it up. My husband noticed immediately. His face changed. Megan, but it was too late. I had already opened it. The letter was short, only 2 sentences, but they changed everything. If you don't come soon, I'm going to tell her the truth myself. My eyes lifted slowly from the page. Tell me what truth? My husband didn't answer, and that was when I realized something terrifying. The secret I had just uncovered wasn't the real one. There was still something worse he hadn't told me. Something he had been hiding for 8 years. And in that moment, I made a decision. The next morning, I booked a flight to Maine. Not to confront my husband. Not to fight. But to meet the woman from the photographs. Because if she was threatening to tell me the truth, then I wanted to hear it directly from her. And 3 days later, when I finally knocked on the door of the White Beach house from the photos, I understood why my husband had been so afraid, because the boy who opened that door looked exactly like him. And when the woman stepped behind him and saw my face, she whispered something that made my blood run cold. You're his wife, aren't you? I nodded slowly. She looked down at the floor for a moment, then back at me. You deserve to know. And what she told me that afternoon destroyed everything I thought I knew about the man I married. But that story is one I'll never forget. And maybe one day I'll tell the whole truth. Because sometimes the person you trust the most is the one hiding the biggest secret. If this story shocked you, make sure to like the video because it really helps the channel grow. And tell me in the comments, What would you do if you discovered your spouse had been hiding an entire life for 8 years? Would you leave immediately? Or would you try to learn the full truth first? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next confession might be even more unbelievable than this one.